Hello, my name is Rain and welcome to my channel where I discuss Fantasy Formula 1. It is race week once again. We're heading to Imola. I'm not going to try and say the entire name. The F1 Fantasy developers have finally decided to add Franco Colapinto to the game, so we're going to take a look at that asset and see what him being only 4.5 million means for our F1 Fantasy teams and our strategies. We're also going to take a look at the different chips and if I think you should use any of them in Imola or the weekends that are approaching. A big triple header in Europe now, so a lot of content is coming to the channel. So if you haven't already, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything happening. It's going to be a lot, but I'm excited for it. Finally, some races in Europe. The deadline stream is back on Saturday at 2 p.m. Central Eastern Standard Time. That's 2 hours before the deadline, 2 hours before qualifying. So do not miss that. Be here on the channel for that. And if you want to, prepare your teams until then, make sure you join the Discord. I think there's a link in the description for that as well. Without further ado, let's talk about Colapinto in F1 Fantasy. Let's start by talking about Colapinto in F1 Fantasy. Colapinto has been traded in for Jack Doohan in the game, meaning that he just straight up comes in at 4.5 million. This is incredible. We were a bit scared that they weren't going to just switch him with Jack Doohan, but instead put him at like a 6 or 7 million price tag. I think this confirms it for us that in the future they're just going to just straight up swap the driver prices if there are any other changes to the team. Say for some reason that, I don't know, Alonso leaves the sport or whatever. I don't know why Alonso would leave the sport, but his replacement would come in at 5.6 million. With Colapinto, at 4.5 million, he instantly becomes one of the must-have options in the game. Why? Well, because he cannot decrease in price, right? We've already talked about Gabriel Bortoleto being a good option for this week, and I mean future weeks as well, just because he is one of those drivers that you're not going to lose budget on him. Now, granted, with that DNF that he had in Miami, he's not going to gain price either, at least not for the foreseeable future. But just knowing that your budget is safe and that you can't lose any value on an asset is really powerful, because then your budget is left in the cost cap, meaning that you can then use it for an upgrade when you need it. And Colapinto, in my opinion, is just an upgraded version of Bortoleto. It's a better car. I think it's a driver with more upside. Sure, a bit more downside as well. We've seen him be crash prone at the end of last year when he was in that Williams car. But I do think the upsides completely outweigh the downsides of him. In addition, because he's a new asset, he doesn't have any of that, DNF baggage that Gabriel Bortoleto has. And if we actually take a look at the budget builder, which is on F1 Fantasy Tools website, you should definitely go to that channel and check it out. If you want their premium features, you can do so. You can get those by using my code link in the description. Colapinto is actually the driver with the least required points for a 0.6 million upgrade, needing only 6 points to increase the maximum, whereas someone like a Lance Stroll, who we've like discussed buying in this race, needs 9 points, right? So I do think Colapinto is definitely one of the must-buy options this week. I don't even think really it's a competition. I would buy Colapinto over Lance Stroll, over Hulkenberg, maybe even over getting Alex Albon. I mean, we've discussed all of those being options in my team selection video last week, and I think Colapinto is better than all of them, really. So with that, let's just refresh the site, and this was my team. And if you remember, I've discussed what I need to change about my team in last week's video, and that's Fernando Alonso and Ollie Bearman, because those are the two assets almost guaranteed to drop in price. Esteban Ocon is completely fine. I don't think he's going to increase in price with a 13-pointer, right? But he's also not going to drop the most. I think he definitely is going to reach that 4-pointer, and he's not really the one that I have to get rid of. Where someone like Alonso, 22 points, he's never reaching that. Bearman, 23 points, he's never reaching that. So I need to sell those two. I do have a third transfer if I want to get rid of Ocon, but that's more like a luxury transfer if I don't want to have transfers in Monaco. And looking at the drivers here, if I get Colapinto in, I can nearly afford to get Alex Albon if I were to also downgrade Ocon. So I could do something like this, where I do make that luxury transfer of Ocon, and then do Colapinto, and then I have basically my own pickings of if I want Liam Lawson, Nico Hulkenberg, or Bortoleto with this. I think, is there a merit in taking Hulkenberg for a 5-pointer? I personally don't think so. I would actually rather just slot Bortoleto in there and have both the 4.5 million assets. And I do think this is the most powerful thing about this strategy, is that look at the budget left here. I'm close to being able to afford some pretty crazy stuff here instead of Alex Albon. I mean, for example, Yuki Tsunoda, we've already talked about him in the Franco Colapinto video that I showed, that I posted last Friday. Yuki Tsunoda I can fit in here with 0.1 million in the bank. Now, I don't want this for Imola because Tsunoda is going to drop, but that 33 pointer that are going in Miami is going to be really, really good after this minus 17 pointer is gone, or out of rotation, I suppose, when we get to Monaco. So I do think Yuki Tsunoda is very likely to be in my team for Monaco if the Red Bull doesn't look like an absolute tractor. But for Imola, I'm more and more just leaning towards doing something like this, actually making the transfer of Ocon. If I weren't going to do that and just get rid of Behrman and Alonso, I would still get Colapinto in there. And it's so crazy that I would, almost consider doing this anyway and keeping 6 million in the bank for that potential Tsunoda transfer next week in Monaco. So with Colapinto, I would consider him a must-buy asset in F1 Fantasy this week. He's just a no-brainer, right? The best for budget gains, general upsides, can't decrease in price. So even if he DNFs, even if he gets minus 2 points from starting higher up the grid and decreasing, sure, you lose some points, but you're not going to lose any budget on him, and you can definitely keep him for the foreseeable future. And if he has a good weekend, say he scores a 6-7 pointer and actually increases the maximum in price, he's still going to be his price is still going to be low enough that 6 pointer is going to be enough to carry him for a bit forward, meaning that he only needs to get a couple points in Monaco and then a couple points in Spain after that to further increase and go 0.6, 0.6, 0.6, sort of like we saw Behrman do early in the season. So yeah, Colapinto must buy for me. Get him in now while you can at 4.5 million. The only way you're gonna regret it is if he DNFs, which I get. That is definitely a possibility. The possibility of him being out of the car after 5 races doesn't scare me yet, because obviously there's 5 races before that's even an issue, and I'm gonna be able to get some transfers back before we get there. So Colapinto, if you're not using the Limitless this week, which I know a few of you are considering, I do think you get Colapinto in there. So let's switch over and talk about some of the chips and if I think any of them are viable this weekend. So these are my personal used chips so far. I've used Wildcard, obviously on the second race of the week, on the second race of the season because my start was so bad, and then the no negative last weekend in Miami, which I considered was a successful use of the chip. I still have my Limitless, and I am not using Limitless in Imola anymore. For, 2 reasons. One, most of my assets are going to decrease in price. I mean, Ocon looks like it for a 0.2 decrease. Hadjar could even decrease 0.2 million as well. And then Alonso and Behrman are all but guaranteed to drop 0.6 million in price. So therefore, I'm not using Limitless. And I also think the addition of Colapinto at 4.5 million is such a must-have option that even if you don't have assets that are going to, decrease 0.6 million. Say you don't have Behrman, you don't have Alonso, I don't know why you wouldn't have had Behrman. I mean, everyone had Behrman up until this week. But even if you're like, okay, I only have Behrman and I have Stroll, I have Hadjar, I have Bortoleto, so all my other assets look decent. I still think just the addition of Colapinto as an option that looks, likely at least for an increase in price and the most likely, I would say, to increase 0.6 million, I think that's enough to deter me from using the chip altogether. If the transfers I make end up successful and, the drivers I get in score a lot of points and they all look likely to increase in price in Monaco, even knowing Monaco is a very low scoring weekend, maybe I could use my Limitless in Monaco. So Limitless in Monaco is definitely not completely off. It's just not something I'm likely to do. I'm more likely now to save Limitless for probably Hungary, which is after the sprint race in Spa. But it is very important to know that 2 races coming up, both Imola and Monaco, are 2 of the worst tracks on the grid for overtakes, meaning they are really, really bad for those cheap assets, those back markers, the midfield drivers. They are less likely to score a lot of points in the upcoming 2 races, meaning that the races that comes after that, all of our assets are likely to keep decreasing in price. You know how I talked about, 2 or 3 race weekends ago that, budget building is kind of dead? Well, this is what I'm talking about. It's going to be slim pickings for what we can get that will actually increase in price. So when an asset like Colapinto just drops into our lap, we kind of just have to grab it. And you can't, for example, buy Colapinto and then activate Limitless. That's not how Limitless works. After using Limitless, your team will revert back to what it was the previous weekend, meaning that you can't make transfers and then Limitless. I get this question all the time, so sorry if I, repeat myself, but I do get that question a lot. So just because you can't get Colapinto if you're Limitless, I think that devalues Limitless by quite a bit. I do think Colapinto is that good of an option in F1 Fantasy that we have to just drop all our Limitless plans and just go for Colapinto while we can. I've seen some people make the argument that, we can't just walk around and wait for Limitless forever. And while I agree with that, I think there are a lot of good races coming up. And I mean, I think Hungary is a place that I've touted as being a good Limitless option in the past. And it comes straight after a sprint weekend. And if your team doesn't look fantastic for budget gains at that point, it's midway through the season. It's not the end of the world. And at that point, you can just kind of pop it. And I do think the whole, budgets are lower, so teams are worse, meaning that the delta is better. I think it's slightly overplayed. I mean, it obviously has some merit. I mean, we're not making that argument just because, right? There is a reason we're saying that, because it's partially true. But I don't think it's that big of a deal, and I don't think Hungary is that late in the season that it's going to be that noticeable. So for that reason, currently I'm eyeing up Hungary. Eventually, potentially Spa if the sprint quali looks really, really good for it. And that's the good thing about waiting for Hungary as well, that you get another sprint race to sort of look at the sprint qualifying and feel around and see if that could potentially be a good option. But for me, it's probably going to be Hungary. I'm keeping the cards on the table for a potential Monaco Limitless, but that's only if things line up perfectly. But I do think all my Imola Limitless plans are now, with Colapinto only being 4.5 million, completely off. So thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like the video if you haven't already. It really does help out a ton. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you on the deadline stream on Saturday. Do not miss it. Goodbye.